This man threw a little dog into a lion's cage. Then the lion tries to smell him. Everyone held their breath as they gazed, enthralled. The park fell silent, creating an unsettling atmosphere. He gripped the leash tightly, waiting to see what would happen, but ready to respond quickly if things went wrong. The two sets of eyes then met and spent a few seconds assessing each other. Finally, one of them took the initiative. And what occurred next was completely unexpected. Only a few months ago, John Rank had no idea he'd be in that situation. He just welcomed two kittens into his home, but these weren't your normal house cats. It was Tony, a tiger cub, and Bone Digger, a lion cub. This new pair, on the other hand, was something exceptional. John groomed and played with Tony and Bone Digger while hand-feeding them formula and raw meat. Despite their differing species, the two cubs quickly became like brothers. They enjoyed running about and fighting with each other as much as with John. Tony was the more fun of the two and occasionally got a touch too harsh with John. But Bone Digger was always there to keep his feline pal in check, snarling at him to keep him from hurting John. And there was a good reason for it. Bone Digger was brought to John since he couldn't live in the wild due to a metabolic bone ailment he was born with. Because of this uncommon disease, his bones became somewhat distorted and more fragile than those of a typical lion. Bone Digger would have to spend the rest of his life in a cage, away from larger, stronger creatures that may harm him. Fortunately, he had discovered someone who knew what it was like to be disabled. And that someone happened to be John. John had always lived on the wild side even before he began caring for large cats. He tried bungee jumping one day in 1994. He plunged 55 feet to the earth as the trapdoor failed. He was alive although he fractured both of his feet, as well as his hip and back. The doctors warned him he'd never walk again, but he's a very obstinate man. He was able to restore the use of his legs after undergoing physical therapy. However, he continued to suffer from infections, and he soon received some life-changing news. Both of John's legs were amputated below the knee. But this only strengthened his resolve. He began caring for young wild cats, and it quickly became his obsession. He formed an especially deep friendship with Bone Digger, most likely because they both knew what it was like to be physically different from others. But, after all, these were big cats, and he couldn't keep them in his house forever. Fortunately, the appropriate site was already waiting for them. In addition to caring for young kittens at home, John worked as a park manager at the Greater Wynwood Exotic Animal Park. Tony was taken to see the other tigers in the park, while Bone Digger was given his own cage. Despite having far more space, he was unhappy. Bone Digger was lonely because he missed his playmates Tony and John. He'd pace around the enclosure, biting at the fence. But John knew he couldn't put Bone Digger in with the other lions or tigers because he'd be harmed. Having said that, he didn't want him to be alone. That's when he had an unusual thought. Aside from the wild animals in enclosures, the park also housed a dachshund pack of 4, Abby, Milo, Bullet, and Angel. They were regarded as the park's mascots and were allowed to roam freely. They were quite friendly with all of the animals in the park, not just humans. Abby was the pack's leader and the bravest of the 4. This sparked an idea in John. While another keeper held the young lion, John leashed Abby and went into Bone Digger's enclosure. After a few seconds of staring, Abby began bouncing about, evidently eager to play with Bone Digger. Suddenly, the lion yanked away from his keeper. It was a stressful time since neither guy knew if he was going to strike Abby. But what followed was completely unexpected. Bone Digger really backed away from Abby, as if he was afraid of her. But Abby didn't stop, and the young lion's curiosity got the best of him, and he approached the wiener dog slowly. He started sniffing her and she wagged her tail as he moved closer. Abby began racing about on the grass, ecstatic, and soon discovered Bonedigger's hoard of toys. The lion charged over to guard his belongings, and Abby licked his nose. That's when John realized his strategy had succeeded. And Bonedigger, who was looking for a new playmate, found the ideal companion in Abby.